Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. I am Adam Pawadic sitting here with Aaron Cameron at the Real Capital Conference. It's one of Aaron's mine's favorite because, of course, it does focus on capital.
All our friends are here.
Yeah, everybody. Just the whole club's together. It's fantastic. Our guest today is John Peets, Vice President, Head of Leasing GTA for Oxford Properties Group. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to jump into John's background. But the topic of the conversation today is going to be office leasing. I mean, we're in the biggest office market in the country. John will get into it, but Oxford's likely one of the largest, if not the largest, office holders here. So he's going to have a great view on where we are. I mean, obviously, people spend a lot of time. Everybody's got an opinion right now on return to office and all that, but this gentleman would be more than qualified to speak on it. So that's why this will be a little different. But John, let's just jump into it. Your background, how'd you get into real estate? How'd you end up this massive real estate portfolio to take care of?
Yeah. Well, back in the late 80s, I had a summer job with Cadillac Fairview because my brother-in-law was the head of leasing at the time. So while I was completing my degree, I would do all kinds of Joe jobs for the sales team at Cadillac Fairview. And so, yeah, it was absolutely being in the right place, right time in terms of the opportunity. Didn't have to really go through a very comprehensive interview process. And it's not that my brother-in-law hired me. He left the business, left Cadillac Fairview, and I was hired by his successor. So it was kind of nice in that regard. I had a person who believed in me and had saw me kind of interact with everybody during the summertime while I was interning there. And yeah, one thing led to another, and 30-something years later, 34 years later, I'm loving the real estate business and having a lot of fun, and met some amazing people over the years. As you talked about, mentors and really interesting markets that I've been through in terms of the early 90s recessions and the 9/11 crisis. You talk about the great financial crisis in 2008. So, seen a lot of interesting markets. And you were asking about a story. I thought it would be funny to share with you, kind of a young person's view of the world, and how impetuous sometimes we can be. And so one day I was in Peter Sharp's office, who was, at one point, he was the chief operating officer of Cadillac Fairview. He went on to become the CEO of the company, but in the period of time that I'm talking about, which would have been the mid 90s, Bruce Duncan was brought in from JMB out of Chicago to kind of breathe new life into Cadillac Fairview, and really to take the company public. So I was sitting in Peter Sharp's office, and back then those offices were 500 square feet, not 150 square feet like they are today. And there might have been an ashtray on his desk too for cigars and that sort of thing after hours. But in sitting there talking to Peter about a transaction that I was working on at the TD Center, and it was a large enough transaction that he was interested in it, and it was going to move the needle. Bruce Duncan walked into the room and leans over my shoulder and says to Peter, "Where's the PSA on 415 Yonge?" And I looked over my shoulder, and in a kind of a cheeky kind of way, I just said, "We're buying 415 Yonge Street?" And because it was so out of character with the Cadillac Fairview brand and image. And he said, "Yeah, we're buying 415 Yonge Street." And I looked at him again and I said, "Why are we buying 415 Yonge Street?" And he has these steely blue eyes, and he looks at me and he says, "To make money." So that principle still holds true today. No matter what market you're in, you're trying to make money, right?
It answers a lot of questions.
It was yes, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. So that was a funny experience. But no, lots of really interesting ups and downs and recessions and buoyant markets, and just a ton of fun. That's what I love about the industry, right? And I love about my job and my role at Oxford is, no day is the same. Everything is quite dynamic and very much a reflection of the economy, So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How long have you been at Oxford for?
This will be my 19th year. So
Wow.
I started back in 2004. I was in brokerage. Previous to that, I was with Cushman and Wakefield, or Royal LePage at the time, Royal LePage Commercial. And then prior to that, if I'm going back in time, it was Trizac Hahn, it was Cadillac Fairview. I worked at Cadillac Fairview twice actually. So right out of university, like I said, I started working with Cadillac. Then I went to Brookfield Properties for 6 years and had the pleasure and the privilege of leasing Brookfield Place. Very interesting stories there in terms of how those properties came to be and their financial performance. Which first tower was fantastic, 161 Bay, made lots of money on its initial lease up. Second tower, not so much, and we can talk about that if
Would
you
the
want.
would the date stamps of each one of those define why you're making money on one and not the other? Is that
Yeah, one was brought on and pre-leased in the late 80s. There was a lot of froth, and then of course in the early 90s when the other tower was launched, it was at the very beginning of a protracted recession. I think you might have remembered John Love uttering the word "survive till '95." We were in the depths of a long recession, so um, that property had a significant amount of leasing to do. We kicked the building off with 10% pre-lease commitment from Lang Mishner, and it was a tough slog for the rest of the 1.2 million square feet to lease for the remainder of the building. So, yeah, not good timing, right? Everything in life is about good timing and being in the right place, right?
You mentioned 500 square foot offices. Do you wish that was still the case today? Would it make your job a little easier if everybody demanded
Yeah,
500 square feet?
yeah, it certainly would. No, it's the whole notion of the office and the workplace is it has to change. There's so much going on in terms of how to bring people back to the office. And certainly, I think pre-pandemic, you would see that the office or the workplace in general was failing its employees. There were a number of different factors that would indicate that. Things like not enough adequate meeting space, not enough space for people to do the different activities that they wanted to do. This whole notion of activity-based work, kind of came about, just prior to the pandemic and was being executed by groups like Deloitte and others, these large institutions that were trying to accommodate large numbers of people. But, there were lots of acoustic issues. There were lots of, just work styles or workplace decor and furniture and IT. And so there were a lot of pain points that were preceding this pandemic. But now I think, employers have recognized this and they're starting to really think about how to build a better mousetrap. And we're obviously trying to help them in that regard.
So what's the hottest new trend in office that is going to be the tool to get
Yeah.
people back on Mondays or Fridays? That's probably the challenge now. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everybody's in. Monday, Friday, no.
Yeah. Well, I think, from a structural point of view, I just don't see the office going back to a 5 day a week um, rhythm again. I think we're in that hybrid world. We're never going back. I think it was Leisman that said 80% of organizations are providing their employees with hybrid options, and
Unless you own office buildings, you likely are not.
yeah, no, and well, in fact, truth be told, Oxford has a very adult-like way to approach this as opposed to a firm mandate. But we've approached it on the basis of we're an office-centric company, obviously, but if your team leader or your manager believes that it's more effective for there to be flexibility, they'll offer that
That's
to their
nice.
teams. So there's not a sort of a heavy draconian.
Thinking of the King Sets and the Allieds of the world, which are all just 5 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah. My group, my team, loves and wants to be together and wants to be in the office. And of course, when you're leasing space, you have to be there because things happen at the drop of a hat. You need to be, able to respond to brokers or tenants, tour requests or meeting requests. So we're constantly at the office, our group, but there's definitely other groups that have the freedom and the flexibility. And it's, really is a function of how the offices are set up, right? I mean, sometimes open concept just does not meet the needs of individual workers, and they want that quiet time, they want that focus time, so they can do that at home.
Yeah. No, the
Yeah.
hybrid concept is very attractive, I think, for most people, depending on their situation at home. I've got young kids, so I prefer to be in the office just solely based on that.
Good thing your wife doesn't listen to
No,
this podcast.
she does. That's okay. She knows it. What I thought was an interesting line of questioning for you: is it annoying or frustrating, or is it a welcomed change that all of a sudden everybody has an opinion about what you're an expert in? All of a sudden, this back to office is headline news. Everybody thinks they know the answer. Is that fun for you? Because now at the dinner table or the cocktail parties, you can have this conversation. Versus before, I was like, oh, office
What do you
leasing,
do?
interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, right?
Yeah, it is very interesting, and people do have opinions about it, obviously, because we're all earning our livings in one way, shape, or form connected to our built environment. So yeah, no, it is very fascinating because there's no one silver bullet. There's no right answer. You know, each organization, each team are different. So you're going to have a mix of responses, and I think that's what makes it very interesting, and it provides texture, you know, to the world that we live in.
It's such a pivot. Sort of cut you off.
Yeah,
Such a
yeah,
pivot for you, because before it was kind of everyone was in 9 to 5, 5 days a week. There was no. I mean, there was a little bit of work from home noise, but the most interesting thing about office space, and correct me if I'm wrong, was really we were trying to cut down on the people per square foot and kind of cram more people in and make it more efficient
and that's where
space.
hoteling and activity-based work came into play, and so we were experimenting with the whole hybrid notion prior to. I know Scotiabank was, I know Deloitte was. I mean, there are many organizations the world over that were experiencing, you know, a new way of working and trying to maximize their footprint. But back to your question, Adam, about what, you know, what brings people back, or what are some of the more effective ways of bringing people back. Again, it all comes back to the human being, I think, and providing them with the amenities that they have at home. A lot of people want the same functionality that they have at home, so quick access to good quality food and beverage. You know,
I can wear my pajamas.
if you so choose, as long as they're Maple Leaf logos.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, you're all right. No, and certainly fitness, right? Health and wellness is a huge contributor. I was in the gym the other day, and I often interact with people, just ask them questions about, you know, how's it going? You know, they were talking about coding, and you know, this group of 5 young guys, and having a great conversation. And I interjected and said, "So, would you rather do that at home, or would you rather do it here at the office?" And they said, "The only reason we come to the office is we love this gym." You know, and it happened to be in one of our buildings, which is part and parcel with the strategy of trying to bring or support employers to bring their employees back. You know, as prior to the pandemic, Toronto wasn't, you know, embracing the same level of amenitization that you did have in, say, cities like Vancouver or Calgary. Calgary always had a fitness facility, a conference facility in their AA or AAA buildings.
And that would be fitness as an amenity, not just you put a tenant in that offers fitness services.
Right. In this particular case, we did an RFP. We selected a provider that will provide a high level of health and wellness, but at the same time, it's subsidized through operating costs, and the actual employee would only pay a very small nominal fee of $40 a month. So, you know, you're getting classes, spin classes, yoga classes, you know, boot camp classes, all of the traditional workout facilities, and we've found a real uptick in membership really since January. Not because necessarily due to New Year's resolutions, but we're still seeing the staying power and the growth in those numbers. So we're happy about that.
Did Toronto lag the rest of the country just because of the competitiveness here? There wasn't a need. The tenants weren't demanding it, so the owner.
You're talking pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the amenitization.
You
referenced that we didn't have the same level. I'm just curious why that is.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess, you know, owners of property felt like if you wanted to engage with that kind of amenity, you'd pay for it yourself. And so as a, you know, person that enjoys fitness, you know, I went over to Equinox at
Mhm.
Commerce Court West.
Yeah,
Where
there
I
were, you could
preferred,
get what you
you
wanted.
could get what
But
you
not for
wanted.
$40 a month.
No, no. So, that's all changing. There was a heavy emphasis on food and beverage in Toronto, right? That seemed to really drive.
As long as you had a Moxie's or Earl's or Cactus Club somewhere nearby, that's all that mattered.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
We're so predictable. Eh?
Yeah.
So what is happening now? I mean, we're in 2023. We're in a hybrid working environment. Let's say everybody's kind of coming in 2-3 days a week for the most part. Plus or minus a day
Yeah.
or two. Um,
Yeah. In fact, 59% globally
right.
is the number that Leaseman uses.
And we're a little bit behind, I
Sorry.
think, North America, right?
59% represents
the number of days that people are in the office. So it was broken down. I can't remember the exact breakdown, but 31% would be in the office 3 days or more. 20 some odd percent would be in the office 2 days or more.
okay.
And then 41% would be in the office 1 day or less. So that number, has been increasing according to Leaseman. So really, it's a function of, what are companies doing about it and what can they do about it. I think, when you look at the employment market is dictating how companies are responding. We were talking about it this morning. Technology companies have cut back in terms of some of their employment levels, obviously. But at the same time, I don't think they want to impose a back to office mandate, because I think it'll just be moving, excuse me, people around from one company to another with a lot of cost associated with that. So I think rather than losing those people because you force them to do something that you ultimately want, it's better to just treat them like adults and let them make the decisions. And look, I think it all comes down to, is it a competitive advantage for us to permit our employees to work flexibly? I think the moment it stops being a competitive advantage, they're losing people to firms that have 500 square foot offices or better facilities, higher quality facilities. I think that'll start to change, and or when the employer has the balance of power back.
So then the crux becomes, let's assume that leadership around the world, Canada in particular, will focus on GTA because that's where we are and that's your expertise.
Yeah.
Or wrap their heads around the fact that hybrid is here to stay. And so it is 2 to 3 days a week or whatever the number ends up being, but it's some sort of flexibility. Your office use is now declined by the inverse, right? Let's say it's 60% in the office compared to what it was pre-pandemic. You got 40% less office use. I mean, I know that's not exactly one-to-one. What do you do? And how are we going to adopt or how to adapt to that new reality?
Well, I think it's a free market, and I think companies will vote with their feet. And we're seeing that. We're seeing a massive flight to quality. Our vacancy would be under 10%. It would be around 9%.
You're just outperforming market by 300-400 beeps at least, right?
Oh, depends on what you're measuring it against. I mean, the broader market would be 17-18% available. We're sitting at 9%, with very little kind of exposure in the next several years. And that has to do with a whole bunch of other factors. The quality of the buildings, the location of the buildings, the way they're managed, the way their capital is invested, So we have a distinct advantage in that regard. And I would say that, that's what's going to happen for the foreseeable future. I think we are going to win at the expense of low quality A, B, and C buildings and companies that are outside of the downtown. I think the downtown has a phenomenal advantage over the suburbs. I mean, some might say, well, the suburbs will attract people because it's close to their homes. But look, I think if you think about the demographic makeup of people that are working in the towers downtown, it's millennials and Gen Zs. 75% of the office working population by 2025 will be millennials and Gen Zs. And so it's all about, the convenience of the office and the quality of that office. And so, as we move forward, I just think that there's going to be naturally a persistent high level of vacancy in the lesser quality buildings, and the high quality buildings will reap the benefits of making the investment either retrofitting their buildings and or being fortunate enough to have built in the past 10 years.
Hmm.
You
Are
know?
you seeing that trend starting? I know it's going to take a
Mhm.
long time just because of the
Yeah.
duration of office leasing, but is the sublet market starting to indicate that that
Yeah.
pivot?
Well, look, I mean, the biggest sublets that have attracted a lot of media attention would be Shopify's sublet in the Well, and another large sublet, maybe not media worthy, but LifeWorks at 16 York Street. Deloitte and Touche, or sorry, there's a slip of the tongue. Deloitte had 100,000 square feet in Bay Adelaide North, and that is now leased by the IROC, Investment Regulation Authority. So, look, some discerning companies are going to see the opportunity of being in a brand new building, whether it's the Well or whether it's 16 York. I think the distinct advantage 16 York and some of these large sublets that are built out space will have is that exactly that. Your space is move-in ready versus Shopify, which has base building condition to offer its prospective subtenants. That's going to be difficult. They're going to have
It
to
wouldn't be
invest
attractive to
capital.
some tenants, starting with a clean slate.
It may be, and in our case, we've done some recent transactions at 161 Bay, the best building in the country, and they've started from scratch, and that brings up a whole myriad of other questions around the cost of construction and how are companies addressing that with the high interest rate environment that we're in or the high cost of capital, but you know, on the sublet front, I just want to finish off on that. Those sublets, they will lease. They're very attractive buildings. They're very attractive opportunities. They're fully turnkeyed and ready to go. And 85% of all the transactions in 2022 in downtown Toronto were in built premises. So it's there is something to be said about being able to create your own culture and your own identity through the fit and finish. But in a lot of cases, they can make some minor adjustments and make it their own.
Are you competing with sublease space within your own portfolio?
It's a great question. We only have about 3% of our portfolio attributed to sublease premises. It's not a big factor for us. And you know what? When it has become an issue, the good news on that side of it is we've attracted some great quality tenants. So, just as an example, at 85 Richmond, we had a company called Touch Bistro that OMERS invested in, and they bit off more than they could chew, and they've sublet to great companies. Pinterest is one of them. They've brought a whole new demographic, a whole new group of people that have energized the asset. So we love that, and we're gonna obviously, if our luck holds out, we'll be able to renew them and extend them and keep them as a customer.
We're almost done, but
Yeah.
we started off talking about amenities, and let's finish there. You'd
Yeah.
mentioned gyms. What other kind of
Yeah.
amenification, if that's a word, are you seeing kind of
Yeah.
coming, and what do you predict over the next couple of years?
Well, my big belief is in our industry needs to transform itself. We need to become more hotel-like. We need to adopt a hospitality mentality. We cannot be passive. We have to move to that next stage. That's what people want. They want a curated experience. Think about your own personal choices you make when you consume products or when you consume services. You want that extra attention. You want that feeling of being, very important. And so I think our industry needs to really bear down on the whole notion of hospitality and deliver it and move away from classifying buildings as class B, class A, class AA, AAA, and move to a 4-star, 5-star experience, because I think that's really what it's all about. It's about the employee experience. The other area I would say specifically would be space as a service. I do believe that with the hybrid notion and with shrinking of footprints like we're seeing in the UK with HSBC, and you have other examples of it here in Toronto, we're going to see a lot more of that. And at the same time, I think space as a service will fill the void for the flexibility that companies need to provide their people, and or for new businesses to to flourish and expand. And so I think we'll see more space as a service offerings in better quality buildings, because it is, considered an amenity if you can pair it up with conference facilities and other offerings that they have. So I think that's an important aspect of it.
You mentioned shrinking footprints. I come into the office 3 or 4 days a week, but on the Friday when I'm not there, in my office is not office space isn't being used.
Right.
So the company still needs as much square feet from me, regardless of whether I'm a 5-day-a-week person or a 3.
Yeah.
If I was a 1, then Aaron might kick me out of my desk. But if I'm coming in, so if you're talking about shrinking footprints, other than hoteling has the capacity to absorb some of that slack. How damaging is it to have people coming in only 3 or 4 days a week to overall demand for office space?
Well, it's like the church, right? You build the church for Easter and Christmas, and I'd say the same thing applies in the case of office. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is when you're going to get peak occupancy. Look, I do believe there's winners and losers in all of this, and we're going to see the lesser quality buildings lose out to the better quality buildings. Shrinking footprint is a reality, but things change. Everything changes. 5 years from now, we can make projections about what that's going to look like. And I know we're going to be wrong, and I know the experts are going to be precisely wrong.
Exactly
right?
wrong.
Yeah. So, I do believe there's going to be great pressure, but that's where we need to put emphasis on our ability to transform the assets if they need to be transformed, and amenitize them greatly in order to bring folks back, and to make that experience commute worthy. I think that's a phrase that's been used quite regularly now. You really have to get over that hump of the obstacle of not wanting to come in because of this long commute. Toronto's traffic is third worst in North America. We need to do something about that, obviously, at a municipal level. And we need to make our transit system safe so that people feel comfortable coming into the office. But I do believe that, business is an organism. It's going to grow naturally. You might shrink today, like cutting back a plant. You're going to make that plant smaller, but it'll grow back, over time. And whether it's physical growth or virtual growth or both, you're going to see that over time, there's great resilience in the Toronto office market. And we've been through these bumpy rides before, like I said, whether it was, some of these great recessions we've been through, or some of these geopolitical or existential threats that we've had over the last 30 years.
Great. I think that's a great note to end on. John, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks to First National for powering the podcast. And of course, thanks to our friends at Real Estate Forums for hosting us here at Real Capital. Thanks again, John.
Yeah, thank you.